for Arfield. What a volley! Scott Arfield! He's been threatening that recently. And all the Burnley players run to the Darwin end. Oh, what a goal! What a goal from Robbie Blake! Burnley's first goal in the Premier League is something very, very special.
Wade Elliott has that change of pace and he's got away from Montgomery. It's the path of McCann and the follow-up finds the net. What a strike from Wade Elliott! A bolt from the claret and blue.
Oh goodness me! What a goal from Patterson! If that is to be the one that takes them to Wembley, you cannot argue with that. Pure quality.
Here goes Mike Conroy. Still time for a winner, maybe. John Francis! They came to York in their thousands. They're going home as champions.
I mean, if there's any justice in the world, Burnley would surely score from this corner. Swung right in there. Ball in there. Yeah! Michael Keane! Oh, that's justice! That is justice at the Amex Stadium. Burnley are level and deserve to be.
Hello everybody and welcome back to Turfcast Podcast for our second show of the 2023-24 season. We are getting deep into the new season here on the channel. Obviously did our first show on Monday with the lad Louis from the Baggies podcast chatting about new signing Dara O'Shea. There'll be more of them coming up soon. We just need to get more signings in before we start getting more of them in. But thankfully, Andy's going to tell us in a minute that they're all coming through the door later today. If anything, we'll probably miss them while we're recording this. Probably not knowing the club, because obviously we've got the kit launch at 12. We are recording this in the morning, so you'll probably be getting this just before the kit launch, so you'll probably listen to it. Hope you all like the new kit. If it's anything like what I've seen so far, it's okay. It's not as nice as last season's, but I think if you compare anything to last season's, this absolute classic, then it's going to look a little bit bland anyway. But fingers crossed it goes down well. I like a collar personally, so I do think it will go down well. But anyway, you know who he is. He's been on the channel plenty of times, so let's bring him in. It is, of course, Andy Jones from The Athletic. How you doing, mate?
Not too bad. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. All the better now the season's coming closer, but I just wish the weather would go back to what it was like.
Oh, well, it's always the way, isn't it? That usually when the first day of the season comes around, it makes itself sunny, except that 3-0 victory over Southampton where it rained for forever. We got to spend all the rain in about 5 minutes, didn't we, of what you'd get in a year a couple of years ago, didn't we?
I've got a bit of a chest infection, everybody, so apologies if you hear me coughing a lot. I hope it doesn't sound absolutely horrific in your cars or in your headphones. But it's obviously not going to be too sunny on the first day of the season because it's 8 p.m. So fingers crossed.
Might be a nice day, though.
Fingers crossed it's at least dry. We've been in the beer gardens all day. But anyway, you're a very busy man. I've only got you for around 45 minutes, so let's get into it. Obviously, James Trafford, it looks like it's a done deal. From what I heard, the medical was booked in for Monday, but it hasn't happened for whatever reason. What is it you know about James Trafford?
Yeah, so it sort of, obviously the fee is agreed, which is, I guess, the main thing. And I think Burnley, I would imagine, would have been delighted to have made sure that was done before he went and did what he did in the final. Because I'd imagine that might have tacked on a few million, or certainly brought maybe a couple of clubs who were thinking about him to the table to sort of maybe get a bidding war on the go. But yeah, that's it. That's sort of as it stands. Yeah, you would expect the medical will get sorted, but it's one of them, isn't it? You know, he's going to have a break, an extended break anyway.
Yeah, sure.
Given he's just been in the tournament, so it's not sort of like he's going to turn up for training tomorrow type thing. So that someone had mentioned that to me the same. I don't know how accurate that is. I've not got that sort of text this morning, so not really had time to stand that up yet. But there's no sort of suggestion yet that there's any sort of concerns or worries. It's just sort of, I guess, just part of this process of, you never know. There's always twists and turns, isn't it, in most deals before, and you never know until it's officially official. But yeah, there doesn't seem to be any sense that like it's about to collapse. But who I'm not going to say 100% it won't, because you never know.
I mean, it's the same with obviously we had a few last season. Name escapes me, the Croatian lad that ended up going to Southampton. Obviously, it looked like a done deal, and then that fell through. So I think a few Burnley fans get a little bit anxious when we're at this stage now. Like everyone's saying it's done, we're just waiting, and it's the same at the minute with Koulibaly, isn't it? I mean, again, I heard the medicals on Monday. I'm not sure if it took place or not. I haven't heard anything about that one. Even transfer Dom Fabrizio Romano's been chatting about this one. He's been saying, yeah, soon, it'll be announced soon and all this. So medical on Monday, like I said a couple of days ago. So what's the latest with Koulibaly?
Yeah, I've not heard anything since I sort of tweeted on Sunday, which was pretty much the same information that the Fabrizio Romano had tweeted initially. The sort of medical was scheduled, and so all being well with that, then you would expect that announcement to be imminent, because as with Trafford, sort of the agreement seemed to be in place anyway. And there was no sort of pushback on that being the case. So all being well, that will be the next one you would expect through the door. But as we say, 99%, but there's always that lingering doubt until it's completely done.
Yeah, sure. One thing you've also tweeted about 23 hours ago, so about pretty much this time yesterday, Andros Townsend, you confirmed obviously the rumours that he had been training with Burnley for the past week, player and club assessing the situation, but this could lead to a contract offer if it suits all parties. Obviously, he had an ACL injury, as you also mentioned in the tweet. What's the latest with that one then? Obviously, that to me suggests that he's training with a view to getting a permanent if obviously the club and him are happy.
Yeah, I think that's certainly an option. I think it's just sort of assessing the situation in terms of, and I think he spoke about this a couple of weeks ago on TalkSport or something, where he was like, I've been out for such a long period of time. I think it was March 2022 when he got that injury. That sort of, you need to be seen, and you can do that, that one-on-one training and all that type of stuff. But teams want to see you in that club environment, and how you're getting on in team training, and do all the medical checks and stuff like that to see how you're getting on before making that decision. And I guess for him as well, it's what role he play in the squad. He's obviously got plenty of Premier League experience, which Burnley you would say lacking a little bit in that department. So it sort of is a logical type of. You look at it like an Aaron Lennon type signing from a couple of years ago, and I know Lennon was obviously slightly older, and but that sort of experience, you can come in, sort of that squad player role, who's available, if you need to, or and a player you could probably you can say you could trust. But then Burnley themselves will probably be assessing, how exactly would he fit, and would he work in the system? Because I don't think he's going to sort of come in and be the number one starter on the opening day, unless deals are still being worked on. Burnley's obviously targeting wide players for decent amounts of money, so you would think it would be a squad player role. So I think that's at the moment, it's just all those sort of different variables of everyone just sort of seeing if this works, and then they'll come to a decision.
Yeah, I think it makes sense, to be honest. Like I said, he brings in a lot of experience. We are lacking in that department. A lot of the squad have never played in the Premier League before. So even just to have him in the building, I think for me that the main thing would be wages. I think he could probably demand quite a lot of wage, so it would depend on whether or not we could afford that. So we'll see. I wouldn't be against it personally. I'd actually quite like it.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing as well, isn't it? Because if he trains well and the reports are good in terms of where he is at fitness wise, it's then what other clubs are going to come in, and can other clubs offer him a bit more football and the Burnley might be able to, and stuff like that. So I think it would make sense in terms of a good reliable option that you can have, and also, as you say, just to be around the building to. If things are not looking great, if you're going on a little bit of a bad run or something like that, which I think Burnley will at some point, I think everyone can accept that. Just to have that calm and experience, and there's some in there who's obviously experienced the Premier League, Jack Cork, Josh Brownhill, for example. But just to have another one, it's Jay Rodriguez as well. Just to have another one is never a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, we will go on a bad run. You're all right, but it'll probably be dropping from 4th to 7th, I think, with the squad that we have at the minute. Obviously, a couple of players that we do know more about, Taylor Howard-Bellis and Teller. There's been a few people asking whether or not they'll be coming back. It doesn't look likely, does it, from my side? I don't know anything personally. I know Taylor Howard-Bellis said goodbye to the squad. Obviously, Teller's now down at Southampton training again, and it looking like they're asking for too much. What do you know about them two?
Yeah, so I mean, Taylor Howard-Bellis looks unlikely just in the sense that, given what Burnley have already done in that department, it would, especially if Koulibaly comes in as well, that's a 5th centre half, and suddenly, do you really need another? Given the money they've spent in that department as well, you're looking at around 7 million for O'Shea. It was 50 million euros for Bayer, so that's already a significant portion of your budget sort of going on that, and then you've already got Ardekil and Ekdal who came in January, so you've got 4 strong options there, and then Koulibaly would add a 5th, and then you've also got that clause in his deal if all being well it goes through, to make that a permanent deal next summer. So next summer you're gonna have 5. I certainly think Burnley would have had an interest in bringing him back, and I don't think you can completely rule it out, but I just think there was a couple of reports about 50 million being the price tag, and teams looking to buy, and I think you would think Burnley would probably need to put resources elsewhere at this point. I think if you spent another 15 million on another centre back, for example, then suddenly it's you are sort of questioning a little bit about how this budget's all going to shape and how the squad's all going to come together, given the other areas of the pitch which definitely need to strengthen in. So that one looks, I would say that's probably quite unlikely. I guess another loan may have made sense, but if you're bringing in a lone centre half in terms of Koulibaly, it just seems like there'll be too many chefs in the kitchen at that point. Nathan Teller, it's fair to say Burnley definitely want to sign him, and I think the player would certainly want to come back because he loved his time here, and obviously you would say the best season of his career in terms of form, and he loved working with company, loved the staff, loved the place, loved his teammates. So and I think Southampton are understanding of that situation. I think there's a sense at the moment in the game that Southampton are overvaluing their players a little bit, just on the whole. And I think that's.
I think everyone is.
Yeah, exactly. It's still very, very early days, and in the window, even though it's been open for coming up to a month now, isn't it? But it's still that those games being played and the cat and mouse and what else is going to happen to have knock-on effects elsewhere and stuff like that. So Burnley still holding interest, and there's definitely been, I understand there's definitely been, sort of those early talks, but that valuation is a little bit, is the problem at the moment. And I think from my understanding, Southampton are still looking towards about the 20 million mark, and I think Burnley are looking at more than 15. But obviously, so there's probably a feeling that there will be a compromise, but when that comes, if that comes, you just don't quite know, because if Southampton get sales elsewhere, why wouldn't they want to keep Nathan Teller, who literally ripped up the Championship last season and division a day, and now the Championship. So if they want a path back to the Premier League, then having a 20 goal a season man there is going to certainly help them. So I think it might depend on what other sales they can do. They've obviously got Lavia, but Prowse, who you would expect to get decent money. But I think the Burnley definitely do want him and are pursuing him. It's just a bit of cat and mouse at the moment, and hopefully there will be a compromise in between the two different valuations.
Yeah, fingers crossed for that one. I think he's the one that I want back the most out of all the loanees. Moving on though, Vranckx. It's a name that splits opinion. But obviously it came out this week that he is apparently focused on playing for Burnley again next season, which I am shocked to see after all the comments he said last season about wanting to stay at Man United. I personally think it's just a case of him going, no one wants me. Let's try and get back in at Burnley. But that's just me playing devil's advocate. What do you know about Vranckx? Is he coming back? Because I heard he was due to report for training today.
To be honest, I've not got a massive insight on Vranckx. It's one that I need to chase up, to be honest. I saw the reports, and it's quite interesting because he does feel like one of Burnley's saleable assets, and you feel like the amount of work that they want to do on their own squad. Vranckx is a player who will get them a bit of money. Obviously, I think the hope was in part sending them to Manchester United. He would play well and playing a winning team and contribute. And he contributed to an extent, didn't he, initially? But then sort of his influence decreased. It's fair to say. Similar to his 6 months at Burnley, to be fair, where he came in and looked like a really good player, and then unfortunately, the form dropped and all that type of stuff, and in the end he was out the team. So I think that the hope was probably that he'd go score goals for Manchester United, and then the interest would increase, and the fee that Burnley might be able to get would increase as well. So it's an interesting one because the company said that he would speak to him when the season's over. So you imagine that conversation is sort of taking place or will take place when he returns. And it's where the company sees him fitting into the system, and you could kind of see a world in where it works because he obviously likes his number 9 to drop in and sort of link play, and that's kind of Vranckx's game, isn't it? To sort of, and you saw that with Ten Hag sort of play him in that number 10 role at times, which worked occasionally, but not on other occasions. So I think it comes down to that really, and the other side of it is, if Vranckx says he wants to leave, then Burnley's negotiation and bargaining position weakens significantly because suddenly teams are like, well, this fella doesn't want to be there, so we're not going to offer you what you want. We're going to offer you half for that type of thing. So it's there's that element to it as well. So but I think we'll find out. I imagine more about sort of the Vranckx situation in the coming days, because I think in that report it said an exit wasn't ruled out, and there would be an element of, I would be surprised if he's a Burnley player at the end of the window. But if Vincent Kompany believes that there's more value in him than maybe moving him on and bringing in another striker, then who would question Vincent Kompany after pretty much every decision he's made so far, and his managerial career at Burnley has been the right one.
Yeah, fair enough. Getting more into sort of like the rumours now then. Obviously, it brought yesterday that Burnley are looking at Gustavo Hamer at Coventry. What do you know about that one?
Yeah, I understand that there's definitely interest in there from Burnley. I don't think it's sort of the extreme advanced stages, if you like, but he's a player that they definitely like. It was a really strong performer for Coventry last season in the Championship, and it's fair to say Burnley have scouted a fair few Coventry players, haven't they, in the last 12 months or so. So he's probably another one who stood out to them. I think the issue is the number of clubs interested in him and the potential price. I think so. The way it was put to me was that Coventry have sold Gyökeres for a lot of money. There's sort of, I guess, less pressure to sell another, and they can sort of demand a decent fee. I know he's only got a year left on his contract, so that does sort of throw that spanner into the works a little bit. But I think Fulham were linked with them a couple of days ago, and I think there's a number of clubs interested. So it's whether Burnley can sort of fight through that battle, and then whether the fee sort of suits their budget. Because I think what we've seen with Burnley under ALK is that if they don't believe they're getting good value out of a player, then they're happy to sort of walk away or move on to another player. And while not completely shutting the door, exploring other options. And midfield is definitely an area that they need to improve on. Whether that is, you would probably say you would want another first choice type midfielder in there, but even the depth side of it, they were quite fortunate with injuries, I think, last season to a number of players. So you obviously don't want to leave yourself open to a couple of injuries, sort of curtailing everything. So but yeah, he's definitely a player on the radar, but it's whether they can see off the rest of the competition for him, and also see if the price is right for them, if you like.
Yeah, fair enough. One that seems to have gone quiet in recent weeks, in fact, I think a lot of the ones that we're going to chat about soon are ones that have gone quiet. It's Jacob Bruun-Larsen. There were reports that were pretty much done, the fee were agreed and all that sort of stuff. I think you put a tweet out about it saying it were pretty much like in the latter stages at the very least. But again, it's gone very quiet, that one, to the point where it sounds like it's pretty much fallen through, or the club have just decided not interested anymore.
I had that information, but I never. But then I was met with a bit of resistance, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So there was a few indications that it was at an advanced stage, and then I spoke to a couple more people and then suggested that it wasn't. So therefore, sort of, I never ended up writing about it. I mentioned it in a piece. I think it was a James piece that I wrote just after the fee had been agreed there. That sort of that's what it seemed. That sort of the suggestions where it was advancing, and obviously a player who'd worked with company before, and but that deal has hit it appears has hit the buffers. There was definitely interest in there. There was definitely talks, but it obviously never got to those. Well, the stage that we all want it, where he's posing with a shirt. I don't quite know exactly what the reason is, and it's always a difficult one with transfers, because I think even this summer Burnley have had issues with agents and stuff like that, where demands and different things, and then you've also got the medical side, and you never know with that if it brings something up that's a concern. Then especially with Burnley and the way that they've the budget works, they can't really afford to be taking too many risks on players who could break down. And I'm not saying that is the reason why Brun Larsen broke down, but it's one of the reasons. Equally, you can terms and all that type of stuff, and fee structures, and there's loads of different reasons why. But yeah, my information initially was that it was progressing and going in the right direction, but then just before I was about to go and sort of put an update out there, then I received a bit of pushback. So it was like, right, okay, I'll sit on it for a little bit and try and find out a little bit more, and sort of it looks like it's certainly hit the buffers.
Yeah, fair enough. Another one is Flemming from Millwall. I'm not sure how far advanced that actually got, other than just interest. So there was reports of bids, but I don't know how legit that was. Is that a case of the two clubs being apart in valuations with that one?
Yeah, so we reported a couple of weeks ago that there was an £8 million bid rejected, or around £8 million. I don't think it wasn't exact, and I think that there had been talk since, but I think the feeling is that it's a bit of a tricky deal to complete. I think Millwall's valuation was pretty significantly higher than what that bid was. They value him really highly, and I couldn't understand why, because I think from watching the Championship last season, I thought he was a real standout. I was really impressed with him when Millwall came to Turf Moor. I thought he was excellent. I think that was an evening game, I think it was. But I thought he was really good. And just watching him throughout the season, he just kept popping up, and you were like, oh, there he is again, playing well. So you can see why Burnley are interested in him. But yeah, it looks like a bit of a tricky deal to do, and obviously the really sad situation with Millwall's owner. I don't know how that sort of affects things on different fronts like that, but it seems like Burnley might be exploring other targets. Well, I don't think you could ever shut the door on it, because Burnley have a habit of if they're interested in a player, they stay interested, if that makes sense. Like, they don't. Yeah. It's very rare that, unless the price is like extreme and they're never going to get him, like, there's always a chance that they'll revisit the deal. So Bartha-Bruggen, for example, is a classic example where they looked at him last summer, looked pretty advanced, but then obviously didn't happen, and they go for Muric. But then come around 12 months' time, who were they interested in? Bartha-Bruggen again, and obviously they don't get him, and they get Trafford instead. But you can see that sort of they don't like sort of lose interest in a player, if you like. It might just be one that they can't do at that point, they might do in the future. So that might be the case with Flemming if valuations can match, but it sort of on that bid, that was well below Millwall's asking price at that point in time.
Yep, fair enough. A name that I'm sure I'm going to butcher here, but it's Georgian international Georges Mikutadze. I think that's how you pronounce it. Was it? Yeah, fair enough. What's the latest with that one then?
So, well, again, I don't think there's a massive sort of. I think there's certainly interest from Burnley, and he's another example of a player who they've looked at in the past, clearly liked, and then explored it again. But I think that seems to be at the interest stage. I think there's a sort of, when you look at the reports and sort of certain rumours, that it's a pretty big price tag on his back. So I think and it was put to me sort of earlier in the window that Burnley aren't necessarily looking to spend, I think, over 20 million on any player, unless it's like a special player who they think this is going to be a game changer type thing. Because I think they've got to spread the budget around to fill all the needs. So it's whether that would fit into the budget, and whether they feel that he is the best option, because it does look like they've scoured the striker market again in the search for sort of finding the right one. Obviously, Lara Foster came in and Femi came in, and Femi's now going to miss the start of the season. But you would hope you will see the steps of improvement that we were beginning to see in Lara Foster to sort of, can he make that step up to the Premier League? It's probably a big ask. But you would hope that this pre-season is really important. Well, it is a really important pre-season for him, but you would hope that it's gone well to sort of put him in the position to be, Burnley's sort of number 9 moving forwards. But yeah, I think he's one of the options anyway that Burnley are considering in that department.
Yeah, fair enough. Mike Tresor, he's another one that sort of like was a lot of noise about a few weeks ago, but now gone quiet to the point where he even was asked about it in an interview, and he said it's nice to hear that Burnley and Vincent Kompany are interested in him, according to reports. What's the latest with that one?
Yeah, again, it's that interest stage, and I think this is what you find with Burnley, and it's the sort of the context to it is that Burnley have interest in a lot of players. That's why I think you see so many links to so many different players, because they're having so many conversations about so many different players, because they don't sort of they have a sort of a long list that then is whittled down to sort of a short list, but they don't ever, and then they'll have a number 1 target out of them, but they don't ever say, well, it's this player or no one type thing as other clubs might. So they will sort of be talking to a number of players in a certain position. I think like you see in sort of the winger situation, for example. So you've got Teller, you've got Clark, you've got sort of Flemming who can play on that side as well, or sort of in wide positions. So, and then it's sort of figuring out what's the best, because they will probably, analytically think they're all similar in terms of what they'll bring, and that's why they've all sort of got to that last shortlist. And then it's about trying to find the best deal possible, because I think last summer they had throughout the summer they had about 60 different deals on the go. Now obviously they brought in 16, which was a lot, but to have 60 different ones who got to various stages of bids, interest, all that type of stuff, talking about terms, talking to agents and stuff like that. So but Tresor, he said he's a fabulous player, isn't he? And I think we'd all love to see him. But yeah, it doesn't feel like it's advanced much from those initial stages. But that's the thing with the transfer market. You can say something and then in half an hour that can change, because there will be conversations going on as we speak, about various players, and bids will be lodged at various points, and you just never know when, those things can change. So it's an ever evolving world, the transfer window, that you can just never predict. But yeah, I don't think it's sort of advanced much more, but certainly Kompany's a massive fan, and you can understand why, because he's a top player.
Yeah. You mentioned him there briefly in passing. It brings me on nicely to my next player that we're apparently interested in, Jack Clark. Obviously it's Sunderland at the minute. Is that a similar thing? Just one of several names that we're looking at and we're just testing the water sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, there's clearly interest in there, and I think it's been widely reported there's been a couple of bids made. I don't think quite to Sunderland's valuation yet, and I think there's been a couple of things. I think from his agency even saying that he's quite happy at Sunderland, but I think at the same time not ruling out a move. So it's one of them, isn't it? Whenever you buy sort of a player from the Championship, there's an element of risk to it, and but the thing is with the Championship as well is that they're in a position where they know they can charge pretty high for these players. Obviously Clark has had a little bit of Premier League time. It didn't go particularly well. Certainly didn't make the impact he would have wanted to, but then was excellent for Sunderland last year. So you can see why Burnley are interested and have looked to get him. But again, it's a lot of this comes down to the price and sort of, can you meet a compromise between what Burnley are willing to pay or able to pay compared to sort of the higher valuations that the teams have of certain players.
Yep, fair enough. Aster Vranckx, again, a name that's probably just been butchered by me. Again, there was a lot of noise about him recently, but it came out last night that he's apparently happy to stay at Wolfsburg to fight for his place. Obviously, coming back from a loan from AC Milan, I think it was. Yeah, it was AC Milan, wasn't it? What's the latest on that one, mate? Because that obviously doesn't sound as promising as it did a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, again, Burnley, if interested in the player, they like the player. But yeah, it sort of shows the revolving world, because I spoke to a couple of people a couple of days ago who sort of seemed pretty convinced that he was on his way to Celta Vigo, and now obviously I saw the same story as you about the potentially staying. So that just shows how quickly things can change. But yeah, that sort of suggests that might not be one that Burnley are going to be able to pursue and sort of get done. But the fact that he was potentially, looked like he was going to Celta Vigo and then has suddenly decided to stay at Wolfsburg, so it sort of shows the madness of it all, doesn't it? And you never know exactly what's going on in negotiations and what the player wants and all that type of stuff. So as it stands, I've no reason to question that report. So that might be the case, but that might be, and this is pure speculation, but it might be a little bit of a, I'm not going to one club, anyone else fancy, jumping in and trying to prize me away instead. You just never know what with these games. But yeah, it looks that if that report suggests he looks like he's going to stay at Wolfsburg.
Fair enough. Just to break away from the transfer stories a little bit, I want to talk about Lyle Foster, because you have mentioned there, obviously, a little bit ago, saying a big pre-season. A lot of stuff you were putting out on Twitter last season after speaking to the club was that the club were quite happy with him behind the scenes and happy with his data. But Sasha went on the BLM podcast recently, and he said that there's a bit of frustration behind the scenes, sort of like contradicting the report that you were putting out towards the season. Obviously, that could have changed behind the scenes. So what is the situation with Lyle Foster behind the scenes? Are the club frustrated with him at the minute? Why have they changed from being positive and happy with his data to a bit of frustration now?
Well, I mean, the report was partly based on sort of the conversation I was having in press conferences with Company and speaking about him. I spoke about him a couple of times with Company. And obviously he's not going to say, he's not going to publicly be disappointed with him. But there was a feeling that he was making, good progress. But I think it was interesting that, he didn't go away on international duty, did he? He was at the pre-season training camp, and I think that maybe he didn't quite make the strides that everyone wanted them to, and but I think there was good signs there, and I think there was an acceptance that, and I think his attitude was and sort of the way he was trying to make the strides for improvement was what was pleasing people. But it's always the way, isn't it? It's some players pick up things quicker, and there may be then elements of frustration that he's not quite. Even the back end of the season, you were starting to see the good things, and but equally there was times in the games where it wasn't quite sticking, or it wasn't quite in the right position, or he wasn't quite cutting out the right pressing angles and stuff like that. So I think that's why this is a big pre-season. There's the hope that he can address all those different issues. But I think the main reason why they were pleased was because of was his attitude to it all, in that he was obviously open to learn and wanted to learn and wanted to try and get better and learn everything. So there may be frustrations creeping in. It's not something that I've heard specifically, but I'm not sort of equally not doubting Sasha's intel, because he knows everything, doesn't he?
I like to call him the Belgian Andy Jones.
Yeah, so it's one of them. It could be that he's just not quite been where they thought he was when they were bringing him in, but equally, I think the way he's going about trying to make those improvements is what's been pleasing in that sense.
Yeah, fair enough. I did put a tweet out earlier asking for people to get involved and ask some questions, so I will move on to them now. I have pretty much covered everything in the questions, if I'm being honest with you. But I will quickly ask some questions. So apologies, Andy, if we kind of like mix up a little bit stuff we've already talked about. It's just to get a few people's questions in. But thank you to Italian Clarets, Ryan Merton, Nicholas Ward, Brian Flemming, Craig Reeve, Paul Wilkins, Addy Roma, Gazebo74, Dan Starkey, Tom Lawton, Dork, BSC Scott, and Truth Seeker, who have sent a lot of questions in. But like I said, a lot of them have been covered already. But Italian Clarets does say, are we getting any closer with attacking options as we're looking light now? It's kind of similar to what Ryan Merton says. And we are looking a bit light on top, aren't we? Because obviously Teller's left and we've not brought a replacement in yet. I mean, I know we've spoke about a few attacking players in the roundup there, but are we actually close to bringing anybody in at the minute?
I don't think sort of like, at the Trafford Koulibaly sort of stage with anyone. I think there's certainly, it's quite interesting actually. It's quite funny because the focus, it was put to me that the focus has been on attacking players all the way through the window. Yeah, all Burnley have done is bring defenders and goalkeepers in. So, but I guess the attacking deals are harder to do because they're the players who win you the games, really, aren't they? They win you the football matches, and the valuations can probably differ a little bit more. So you look at the deals that Burnley have done, or are close to doing. Bayer was pretty much done anyway. Obafemi was an obligation, so that was happening. Vigouroux was a free. So it is those sort of O'Shea, I think, had the release clause for around 8 million. I think that those were the report. So again, you're sort of looking at a set valuation for the player, whereas when you don't have that, that's when the negotiations get hard. So they are, they're working very hard to make sure they do make those additions. Because I think you're right, because they've also lost Barnes, and okay, they might be getting Weghorst back, but equally, that's whether he stays or not. And then suddenly, because I think it's fair to say that and I know Company talked about this last season, that we didn't necessarily need a 20-goal a season striker. But they eventually did get one with Teller, even though he's not necessarily a striker. But yeah, I don't think there's anything like super close, and that's not to say that something might break. There may be things happening as we speak, or in the afternoon there might be something about they have made a breakthrough, and they certainly are trying. But I think they are sort of assessing options and where to go next, or who to go back in for, and sort of just trying to map out exactly what they need to do. Because I think you're right. I think that was the thing. They wanted to improve every area of the pitch, so they've done that. Certainly at centre back, and about to a goalkeeper. So now you would think the focus or the priority will switch to the attacking end of the pitch.
Yeah, what's happening at left back as well? A few people have asked that question, because obviously we lost Markston. Again, that's another loan that I haven't mentioned, but it doesn't look like he's coming back. So what's happening with that one? Are we looking at any left backs?
Well, I mean, Maatsen, sort of, I think, probably about a month ago now, I think, in terms of my report, and there was, Burnley had a £50 million bid rejected. They're still certainly really interested in one and back, but again, there's that price situation, and I think also, there's that feeling of, even though Company signed a 5-year contract, and this is, for probably a fair few players, but how long is he actually going to be at Burnley type thing? And while they all want to play under him, sort of, you've already seen that he had, has a one good season, and gets linked to the top jobs, and is seriously considered for the top jobs, and that's going to continue if he continues on the trajectory he's going on. So, but I think in Maatsen's case, there was also an element of, well, sort of all options were on the table. So Chelsea were happy to keep him, although you struggle to see where he gets the game time behind Cucurella and Chilwell. So do you do a loan? I think he's only got a year left, so we probably have to sign another contract extension, and then you've got sort of, well, how long is that going to be? And you just add a year on? Do you sign a new long term? And sort of, are you convinced as the future? You've also got Pochettino's coming in, and what's his plans for the player? And so you've got loads of different things there, but also a sale being a possibility, but for the right price. And I think Chelsea were looking at sort of the 20 million mark, whereas Burnley would have sort of, again, 15, so a little bit similar to Teller. in that sense. But there was a feeling that there might be a compromise in some sense, and I think with the loan ones, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you can only have those 2 domestic loans, so it's important to make sure you get the right ones. But you want to also assess all your possibilities before you go, because what you don't want to do is for argument's sake, say you get a central midfielder on loan, but then suddenly, a player you didn't think was going to be available on loan suddenly opens up, or suddenly the midfielder you wanted to buy becomes available. Then suddenly you're in that bit of a sticky situation. So I think you've got it. Whereas in the Championship, where you could sort of be a bit more flexible with the loans because you could have more, certainly from domestically and stuff, that you didn't sort of have that issue. Whereas now, when you've got a significantly limited, you want to make sure you make the right type of loans and make sure you're improving. Because if, say for example, if all the wingers prove too expensive, then that's when you go and look for a winger on loan. But if you've already bought, already got 2 players on loan elsewhere, then suddenly that you can't do that. So there's all those little things that will come into consideration during these sort of, transfer meetings and stuff like that.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, I know you're pushed for time, and I know we're getting towards a time where you need to shoot off now, so we'll end it there. I've covered pretty much everyone, all the questions that came in. I've covered pretty much all of them. Apologies if I missed yours, or apologies if I'm not asked about a player that you did ask about. But Andy, it's a pleasure. It's good to get you back on for the new season, with all the new branding that we've got. Hopefully, we'll get you on again at some point over the summer, or again at some point over the season. It's always good to chat to you, mate. But thanks for coming on. It's been a pleasure, and hopefully, like I said, I'll see you later in the season or later in the window.
Yeah, no, definitely happy to be back on whenever you want.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers.